All right, so get ready because we're about to explore the fascinating world of Sicilian DNA. We're going on a deep dive into this really cool research paper, and it looks at something called Y chromosome lineages. And basically, we're going to use those to kind of unravel like the secrets hidden within like Sicilian DNA.
Yeah, it's like a family history.
Yeah.
But it's written in your genes. And in this case, the researchers are focusing specifically on the male line.
Okay, so the big question here is how much of Sicily's like really vibrant history with influences from all over the place like Greece and North Africa can we actually see in the DNA of people living there today?
Right. So what's so interesting here is that they use these genetic markers to trace ancestry.
Okay.
And these markers are things like haplogroups and short tandem repeats.
Okay, now I've heard these terms before, but I they don't really get them. Can you maybe explain them in like a simple way?
Sure. So imagine haplogroups as like chapters in your DNA story.
Okay.
And each one represents a big group of people who share a common ancestor way back in time.
Oh, okay. So like each haplogroup is like a big branch of the family tree.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And then those short tandem repeats, you can think of those as like the individual twigs.
Gotcha.
And they help us to identify even more specific patterns within each of those branches.
Okay, so they basically allow us to zoom in and get even more detail. Cool. So what did the researchers actually find in this study? Anything interesting?
Oh, yeah, definitely. They found some pretty remarkable stuff. So first of all, they found a significant presence of a haplogroup called E3B1A2V13 in Sicilians.
Okay, E3B1A2V13. Easy for you to say. So how common is this haplogroup in Sicily?
It's pretty significant, actually. It's about 37%.
Wow, 37%. That's more than a third of Sicilians. Okay, so what's so special about this haplogroup?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. So this particular haplogroup, it's most common in the southern Balkan Peninsula, and of course that includes Greece.
Oh, wow. So we're talking about a potential genetic link to ancient Greece here. Like, could over a third of Sicilians actually have, like, Greek ancestors from way back then?
It's not necessarily about direct ancestors in the sense of like a great-great-great-grandparent from ancient Greece,
Yeah.
but it does point to a really significant genetic contribution from that region. It's more about like patterns of inheritance over a very long time.
Oh, okay. So it's not like you can just look at your DNA and say, like, oh, my great-great-great-grandfather was definitely Greek.
Right.
But it's more like seeing these broader patterns of migration and mixing over centuries.
Got it. So how did the researchers actually connect this haplogroup specifically to ancient Greece? I mean, couldn't it be from other groups in the Balkans?
Well, they didn't just stop at the haplogroup level. They actually dug a little deeper. They looked at specific haplotypes. Think of them as like unique fingerprints within a family.
Okay, so they zoomed in even further to see if there were any specific patterns that matched up with Greece. Exactly. And that's what they found. They found one specific haplotype that was shared between mainland Greece and Sicily.
So it's like finding a matching fingerprint across time and space. Wow, that's incredible.
Mm.
But how can we be sure this connection goes all the way back to ancient times and not like more recent migrations, like people moving back and forth between Greece and Sicily throughout history?
Well, that's where the concept of TMRCA comes in. That stands for Time to Most Recent Common Ancestor. It basically helps us to estimate how long ago two lineages shared a common ancestor.
So it's like calculating how many generations back you have to go to find the common link between two people or two groups.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And get this. They estimated the TMRCA for this shared haplotype to be roughly 2,380 years ago.
Wow. That's almost spot on with the height of Greek presence in Sicily. That's incredible. Okay, this Greek connection is mind-blowing. But what about other groups that left their mark on Sicily? Like, we can't forget about the North African influence. Did the researchers find any genetic evidence of that?
Absolutely. The study also found evidence of gene flow from North Africa. Specifically, they found a haplogroup called E3B1BM81, which is most common in Berber populations. Yeah, okay. E3B1BM81. Another mouthful. So how prevalent is this North African haplogroup in Sicily?
It's not as common as the Greek signature. It's around 6% of the Sicilian gene pool. But it's still a noticeable mark. It's like a reminder of the island's really complex past.
So not as huge as the Greek influence, but still a significant piece of the puzzle.
Okay, so this North African connection, does it also date back to ancient times? Did they find anything as specific as that southern Balkan haplotype we were just talking about?
Well, they didn't find a specific haplotype with like a clear-cut TMRCA for this one.
Sure.
But the paper suggests that events like the Arab invasion likely contributed to the presence of these North African genetic markers in Sicily.
Makes sense. We're looking at layers of history embedded in the DNA, right?
Exactly. It's like different chapters of history are kind of layered within the Sicilian DNA, each leaving its own unique mark.
That's a great way to put it. Okay, so we've talked about Greece, we've talked about North Africa, but we've got to remember that Sicily's right in the middle of the Mediterranean. I mean, it must have attracted people from all over. Did the research find any surprises in the genetic data? Any hints of influences beyond these two main groups?
Yeah, you bring up a good point. And you're right, the research did find some really intriguing clues that kind of point to an even more diverse genetic heritage.
Ooh, like what?
For example, they found the R1b1c M269 haplogroup. This one's actually more common in Western Europe.
Wow, Western Europe too. So it's not just a black and white picture of Greek versus North African. It's more like a vibrant tapestry woven from all these different threads.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It makes you realize that Sicily wasn't just shaped by like a few major migrations, but by a continuous flow of people and cultures over centuries.
So it's like this ongoing, ever-evolving mix, right?
Yeah.
This is seriously fascinating stuff. Okay, I think we've laid some good groundwork here, but I'm really curious to get into the details. What else did they find? Like, what really stood out to you as particularly interesting?
So one of the things that really fascinated me is that they didn't just look at these, these broad haplogroups. They actually zoomed in and looked at the diversity within Sicily itself. And that's where you see like the real beauty of this research, the ability to actually see subtle variations even between the east and west of the island.
Wait a minute. East versus west. Are you telling me there are, like, genetic differences within Sicily itself?
Absolutely. And those differences, they paint a picture of how various historical events left their unique mark on specific regions. It's like exploring a city where each neighborhood has its own, distinct character and story.
Okay, now you've really got me hooked. East versus west. This is getting good. But before we go there, let's take a step back for a second. Like, why does all this matter? Why should our listener care about the genetic heritage of Sicily, even if they, like, don't have any known Sicilian ancestry?
That's a really great question. And I think the answer is that this research goes beyond just Sicily. It's a reminder that everyone carries this unique genetic legacy. It's like a story waiting to be told. And by looking at places like Sicily, we gain a deeper appreciation for the interconnectedness of humanity as a whole.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like realizing we're all part of this huge family tree, and
Yep.
the branches stretch across continents and go back like thousands of years.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're all connected, but we also have these unique stories written in our DNA. That's amazing. All right, now I'm ready for those regional variations. What did the researchers find when they compared East and West Sicily?
Well, they found that that E3B1A M78 haplogroup, remember that's the broader one that includes the Greek-associated one, well, that one shows up more in the east compared to the west.
Okay, so more of that broader haplogroup in the East. Does that mean there was, like, even more Greek influence in that part of the island?
Well, it's possible.
Yeah.
But we've got to remember that particular haplogroup, it's not exclusive to Greece. It's found in other parts of the Mediterranean, too.
Right, right. So we can't just assume it's all from Greece. Okay, so, but doesn't that make things even more confusing? How do we untangle all these different threads?
Yeah, it's a bit of a puzzle, isn't it? But that's where looking at those more specific details comes in. Things like the presence of that Southern Balkan haplotype that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
That one with the TMRCA that lines up perfectly with the Greek colonization.
Okay, that makes sense. So the East has more of this broader haplogroup, but the presence of that very specific Greek haplotype just adds another layer of evidence to the story. Cool. Okay, so what about the West? Did they find anything, like, distinctive over there?
They did. The Western region actually showed a higher frequency of the R1b1c M269 haplogroup. And this one's interesting because it's most common in Western Europe.
Oh, wow. So a totally different branch of the family tree popping up over there.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like finding a piece of a totally different puzzle in the mix. So we've got hints of Western European influence, too. This is really turning into, like, Sicily's, like, this incredible melting pot of genetic contributions.
Precisely. And what's even more fascinating is that these subtle variations between East and West, they aren't just random. They actually reflect something really meaningful about the history of those regions.
Wait. You're saying these variations can actually tell us something about the different historical events that happened in those areas?
Yeah, exactly. Remember how we talked about the eastern part of Sicily kind of clustering closer to populations in Greece and the Aegean Islands on that genetic map?
Yeah, and the western part showing more similarities with populations in southern Italy and Western Europe.
Exactly. It's like those little variations we've been talking about are actually reflected in the overall genetic structure of Sicily. It's like different areas are carrying like the echoes of the groups that interacted with them the most throughout history.
This is really blowing my mind. So it's not just about finding like traces of different ancestries, it's about understanding how those ancestries are actually distributed, what that tells us about the specific experiences of different parts of Sicily.
You got it. It really highlights how important it is to look beyond just those big generalizations when we study genetic heritage.
I'm with you there. I mean, even within like a relatively small island like Sicily, you can find this incredible variation that tells us so much about its history.
Right. And that history, it's complex and it's layered. It's not just a simple story.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion or maybe like a delicious Sicilian lasagna, with each layer revealing a new flavor and a new story. But I have to ask, with all this talk about haplogroups and genetic maps, are we missing something? Aren't there like other ways to look at this data and maybe uncover even more secrets about Sicilian heritage?
You're always thinking ahead. And you're right. There's a lot more to explore beyond just those haplogroups. Remember those short tandem repeats, those STRs we mentioned earlier? The
Yeah.
ones that are like those genetic fingerprints?
Yeah, yeah. Those unique variations within the haplogroups, what about them?
Well, the researchers, they found something really fascinating when they looked at the STR patterns associated with that E3B1A2V13 haplogroup,
Yeah.
one that's common in both Greece and Sicily.
Okay, I'm all ears. What did they find?
They found a particular STR pattern. It's a very specific combination of repeats at different spots, and it was surprisingly common in Sicily. And here's the really interesting part. It wasn't just found in Greece. It was practically identical to a pattern that's really prevalent in a specific region of the southern Balkan Peninsula, like the area that includes modern-day Albania and parts of Greece.
Hold on, are you saying they found a specific genetic link between Sicily and this particular part of the Balkans using these STR patterns?
That's exactly it. And it's not just a random coincidence either. Remember that concept of TMRCA, the time to most recent common ancestor?
Yeah, that estimate of how long ago two lineages shared a common ancestor. I'm starting to see where you're going with this.
Well, when they calculated the TMRCA for this shared STR pattern, they came up with an estimate of roughly 2,380 years ago.
No way. That lines up perfectly with the timeline of Greek colonization in Sicily. It's like these STRs are like tiny time capsules carrying this specific genetic signal from that era.
It's really amazing. And to make it even more convincing, the researchers pointed out that the Greek colonies in Sicily, they were mainly founded by settlers from that specific region of the southern Balkan Peninsula, the area that would later become part of Albania.
So it's like the genetic evidence is backing up the historical record. It's like we're putting together this puzzle using both history books and these little clues hidden within our DNA. This is incredible.
And it's a great example of how genetics can provide these tangible connections to the past, and not just confirming the historical stories, but maybe even shedding light on things that we might have missed or overlooked over time.
It makes me think about those ancient Sicilian mosaics, those beautiful works of art made from all those tiny pieces of colored tile. It's like we're creating our own genetic mosaic of Sicily using these haplogroups, haplotypes, and STRs as our colorful tiles.
That's a beautiful analogy, and it highlights the point that studying a population's genetic heritage isn't just about finding one single answer or one single origin story. It's about understanding how all these different influences have come together over time.
Right. It's about recognizing that each person, each population is this unique blend of different ancestries, different stories.
Exactly. And that's why this research is so important for understanding the genetic diversity of modern populations as well.
Okay, I'm curious, what are those implications? Like, how does this research impact how we think about ourselves and our place in the world?
Well, for one thing, it reminds us that Sicily, and really, any population for that matter, isn't just a product of one or two big influences. There's often a much more complex and nuanced picture to uncover.
Right, right. We've seen hints of Greek, North African, and Western European contributions. And who knows what other traces might be hidden in the DNA. It's like that saying, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Exactly. And embracing that complexity, I think, is crucial. It challenges us to move beyond these simple labels and to recognize the richness and the diversity that exists within every population.
It's like saying each person is this walking, talking microcosm of history, carrying within them the echoes of countless migrations, interactions, and stories. It's incredible.
Beautifully put. And that diversity, it has implications for everything, from understanding how susceptible people are to certain diseases, to tracing migration patterns, to just appreciating the richness of human history and culture.
So it's not just about like satisfying our curiosity about the past. It's about using that knowledge to understand ourselves better today and to appreciate how interconnected we all are, regardless of our differences.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's a reminder that we're all part of this shared human story, and that story is etched into our very genes.
This has been an incredible journey so far. We've gone from these broad haplogroups to these super specific haplotypes, from genetic maps to like ancient migration routes. And I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. Anything else jump out at you from this research before we move on? Any other juicy details we need to dissect?
Okay, so let's grab our magnifying glasses again and zoom in on one of the key differences they found between the eastern and western parts of Sicily.
Okay.
It has to do with how often this one haplogroup shows up, and it's
Yeah.
called E3B1A-M78. And this one's actually pretty common across the whole Mediterranean region, and it actually includes like a bunch of subhaplogroups, and that includes that E3B1A2V13 we were just talking about, the one with that strong Greek connection.
Right, right. So it's like we're going back up to that big branch of the family tree with the Greek haplogroup being like one of the little twigs on it.
Exactly.
Okay, so what did they find about this bigger haplogroup?
Well, they found that this whole E3B1A-M78 haplogroup shows up more often in the eastern part of Sicily compared to the west.
Interesting. But does that automatically mean there was more Greek influence in the East? Couldn't it be from some of the other Mediterranean groups that are, part of that broader haplogroup?
You're exactly right. That's a really good point. And that's why it's so important to look at the finer details, to really zoom in. Because like you said, E3B1A-M78 isn't just found in Greece, it's all over the Mediterranean.
Right, right. So we can't just assume every instance of it is like a direct link to Greece. But doesn't that make things even more complicated? Like, how do we even begin to untangle all these different
Well,
threads?
that's where those subhaplogroups and haplotypes come in. They're like our little genetic detective tools.
Mm.
They help us to be more precise about those influences.
Mm.
Remember that Southern Balkan modal haplotype, the one that's so strongly associated with the Greek presence?
Yeah.
Well, finding that in eastern Sicily definitely strengthens the idea that there was a big Greek genetic contribution there.
Okay, that makes sense. So the East has more of this broader haplogroup, plus they found that really specific Greek haplotype, which adds like another layer of evidence to the story. So what about the West? Anything unique over there?
Yes, they found that the western region has a higher frequency of the R1b1c M269 haplogroup. And this one's really interesting because it's most common in Western Europe.
Whoa, so that's like a completely different branch of the family tree showing up over there.
Exactly.
It's like finding a piece from a whole other puzzle mixed in. So we've got hints of Western European influence too. This is really shaping up to be like Sicily's this amazing melting pot of genetic contributions from all over the place.
It really is. And what's really cool is that these little variations between East and West, they're not just random.
Right.
They actually probably tell us something about the different historical events that happen in each of those areas.
Wait, are you saying these variations can tell us about like the specific historical events that happened in different parts of Sicily?
Yeah. Remember how we talked about how the eastern part of Sicily clusters more closely to populations in Greece and the Aegean Islands on that genetic map?
Yeah, and the western part was more similar to southern Italy and Western Europe?
Exactly. So it's like those little subtle variations are actually like mirrored in the overall genetic structure of Sicily. Different parts of the island are carrying these echoes of the groups they interacted with most throughout history.
This is seriously amazing. It's not just about like finding traces of different ancestries. It's about understanding where those ancestries are and what that tells us about the specific experiences of different parts of Sicily.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It shows how important it is to look beyond just those big, broad generalizations when we study genetic heritage.
Totally. I mean, even within a relatively small island like Sicily, you can find so much variation, and it tells us so much about the history.
Right. And that history, it's not simple, it's complex, it's got all these layers.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion. Or maybe like a delicious Sicilian lasagna. You know, each layer has a new flavor, a new story.
I like that.
But I have to ask, with all this talk about haplogroups and genetic maps and stuff, are we missing something? Aren't there other ways to look at this data that might reveal even more about Sicilian heritage?
You're always thinking ahead. And you're right, there's a lot more to explore. Remember those short tandem repeats? Those STRs we mentioned earlier? Those genetic fingerprints?
Yeah, the ones that are like the unique variations within the haplogroups.
Right. Well, the researchers found something really interesting when they looked at the STR patterns that were associated with that E3B1A2V13 haplogroup, the one that's common in both Greece and Sicily.
Okay, I'm really curious now. What did they find?
They found this really particular STR pattern. It was a very specific combination of repeats at different locations, and it was surprisingly common in Sicily. And here's the thing, it wasn't just in Greece, it was practically identical to a pattern that's really common in a very specific part of the southern Balkan Peninsula, like the area that includes modern-day Albania and parts of Greece.
Hold on, are you saying they found a specific genetic link between Sicily and this very specific part of the Balkans, like using these STR patterns?
Precisely. And it's definitely not just random chance. Remember that concept of TMRCA, time to most recent common ancestor?
Yeah, the estimate of how long ago two lineages shared a common ancestor. Yeah, I see where you're going with this.
Well, when they calculated the TMRCA for this shared STR pattern, it came out to about 2,380 years ago.
No way. That's right in line with the Greek colonization of Sicily. Like these STRs are like tiny little time capsules carrying this genetic signal from way back then.
Isn't that amazing? And to make it even more convincing, the researchers pointed out that a lot of the Greek colonies in Sicily were actually founded by settlers from that exact region in the southern Balkan Peninsula, the area that later became Albania.
So the genetic evidence is actually supporting what we know from history. It's like we're piecing together a puzzle using both history books and these tiny little clues hidden in our DNA.
It's a great example of how genetics can give us these really tangible links to the past, and not just to confirm what we already know from historical records, but to potentially even reveal things that might have been missed or forgotten over time.
This is making me think of those ancient Sicilian mosaics, ones with all the tiny little pieces of colored tile. It's like we're building our own genetic mosaic of Sicily using all these haplogroups and haplotypes and STRs as our little tiles.
I love that analogy. And it really highlights how studying a population's genetic heritage isn't about finding one single answer or one single origin story. It's about understanding all these different influences that have shaped it over time.
Right. It's like realizing that each person, each population, is this totally unique mix of different ancestries and stories.
Exactly. And that's why this kind of research is so important for understanding the genetic diversity of modern populations, too.
Okay, so what are the implications of that? How does this research, change how we think about ourselves and our place in the world?
Well, one thing it does is it reminds us that Sicily, and really any population, isn't just a product of one or two main influences. There's usually a much more complex story there waiting to be uncovered.
Yeah, for sure. We've seen hints of Greek, North African, Western European contributions, and who knows what else might be hidden in the DNA. It's like that saying, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important to embrace that complexity. It makes us move beyond those simple labels and really appreciate how rich and diverse every population is.
It's like saying that every person is this walking, talking history book carrying around all these echoes of migrations and interactions and all these stories from over thousands of years.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And that diversity has implications for so many things: understanding disease, tracking migrations, even just appreciating the richness of human history and culture.
So it's not just about being curious about the past. It's about using that knowledge to better understand ourselves today and to see how connected we all are, regardless of what makes us different.
Exactly. It reminds us that we're all part of this one big human story. And that story is right there in our genes.
This has been such an amazing journey so far. We've gone from those big haplogroups down to the really specific haplotypes, from genetic maps to ancient migrations, and I feel like we've barely scratched the surface. Is there anything else that stands out to you from this research before we wrap things up? Any more exciting details we should explore?
There's one more thing I want to mention. It really shows how powerful genetic analysis can be for understanding the past. It's it's like finding a message in a bottle that's been, floating around for thousands of years.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What's this message?
Well, remember how we were talking about how Sicily has this really high level of gene diversity? Like similar to other Mediterranean islands like Sardinia and Crete?
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. It's like right in the middle of everything, all these different groups coming and going, leaving their mark.
Exactly. Well, the researchers took a closer look at that diversity, and they found something really interesting about where it comes from. They found that a big chunk of it actually goes back way further than the Greeks and the Romans.
Wait, are you serious? You mean there were already all these different groups in Sicily even before the Greeks and Romans showed up? That kind of changes how we usually think about Sicilian history, doesn't it?
It does. It means that Sicily was already this mix of cultures and ancestries long before the classical period. And it really emphasizes that the island's genetic heritage is way more complex than we might think at first.
That's incredible. It's like we're pushing the timeline of Sicilian diversity back even further. It makes you wonder, like, who were these groups? The ones who were there before the Greeks and Romans. Where did they come from?
That's the big question. And honestly, genetics alone can't tell us everything. We have to combine it with other things like, what archaeologists have found, language studies, historical records, all of that to really get the full picture of these earlier periods.
It's like we're putting together this huge jigsaw puzzle, right?
Right.
Using all these different tools to fill in the missing pieces and see the whole picture. But even if we don't have all the answers right now, just knowing that this ancient diversity is there, it adds a whole new dimension to the story.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that history isn't always this straight line from one culture to the next. It's more like this tapestry with all these different threads all woven together, all interacting over time.
It's like a reminder that even in places where we think we know the history really well, there are still these hidden chapters waiting to be discovered.
Yeah.
And our understanding of the past is always changing as we find new evidence and new ways of looking at things.
I couldn't agree more. We have to keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep being open to how complex human history really is.
I'm already thinking about what other research is out there, what other secrets we can uncover about Sicily. But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, let's bring it back to our listener. What's, like, the main thing you want them to take away from all this, especially if they're just learning about Sicilian genetic heritage for the first time?
I think the most important thing is that Sicily, like so many places in the world,
Hmm.
it shows us the power of human migration, human interaction, how we adapt. It's a place where all these different cultures and ancestries have been coming together for thousands of years, shaping the land, the culture, even the DNA of the people who live there.
It's like saying that Sicily isn't just a dot on the map. It's this living, breathing example of how interconnected we all are. And by looking at its genetic heritage, we're not just learning about Sicily, we're learning about ourselves and our place in the world.
Beautifully put. And I think it's worth repeating that even though this study focused on Sicily, what we've learned applies to understanding genetic heritage and diversity everywhere.
That's so true. It makes you realize that every place on Earth has these hidden stories, these echoes of the past, just waiting to be discovered.
Exactly. And who knows what amazing things we'll find as we keep digging into the mysteries of our DNA. It's a really exciting time to be studying genetics.
I'm right there with you. Well, listeners, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Sicilian genetic heritage. We hope you've enjoyed the journey.
And don't forget, this is just the beginning. There's a whole universe of genetic information out there waiting to be explored. Keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep celebrating the amazing diversity that makes us human.
Until next time, keep diving deep.